I'm Teisha Bader, and in the news, our continued coverage of the situation in Israel, and in particular, the strong position taken by the United States supporting Israel and condemning terror group Hamas after its brutal attack Saturday morning, October the 7th, on southern Israel. U.S. President Joe Biden addressed the nation on Tuesday about the terrorist attack, which he called an act of sheer evil, and reaffirmed that the U.S. has Israel's back. Well, to discuss further the U.S. position, we are truly honored to have joining us from Washington, National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications at the White House, John Kirby. John, thank you so much. I know it's a very busy time. We appreciate you being here.
I'm glad to be with you. Thank you.
So first, I really would just like to convey our gratitude. President Biden's speech was truly so critical and so important to hear him speak with such conviction. So thank you for that.
Well, it's very personal to the president. He has a long history personally and professionally with Israel and certainly with the Israeli people. So it was coming from the heart.
You could tell. And sadly, 25 American citizens are among the unfathomable death toll from the attack on Israel. And of course, also Americans being held captive by Hamas. I'm sure there's not a lot that you can say about that, but I'm wondering what you can share with us.
Well, first off, our condolences go out to all the families affected by this, certainly the American families, but we know there's a lot more than just Americans that have fallen victim to Hamas, and our thoughts and prayers go to everyone affected by this. We are in touch with those families. Secretary Blinken was in Tel Aviv today and had a chance to meet with many of them, families of the deceased, as well as families who are still waiting for word about where their loved ones might be and in what condition. He conveyed how strongly President Biden feels not only about supporting Israel at this critical time, but also about trying to find answers for those families and to make sure that we're going to stay lashed up and in touch with them. Obviously, we've also offered hostage recovery assistance to the Israeli government in case they might need that. Now, we know they have robust hostage recovery capability, but we also do as well, and we're willing to lend some of that expertise to them. The trick here is that we don't know exactly how many hostages Hamas has. We don't know where they are. We don't know if they're in various groups, whether they're being moved around. And it's an active zone of conflict there in Gaza, where we would suspect most of them will be held. And so that really complicates recovery efforts. It doesn't make it impossible, but it certainly makes it more difficult. And we want to be mindful that we don't do anything or decide anything that brings greater risk to these hostages.
Of course. I saw you getting emotional, and I'm going to get emotional. When you were interviewed, I think it was a CNN interview about the atrocities committed by Hamas and the human cost, these human beings putting a human face on this horrific attack. Can you speak about that a bit?
Yeah, as a spokesperson, you never want to lose composure. And I didn't mean to in that moment. It's just the way Mr. Tapper asked me the question. I had been doing interviews all day, and nobody had really asked me that question that way. And when he did, the images I had already seen just came crashing down upon me, and I hadn't really had time to process it. And so, I ended up processing it on live TV, but the images and the stories now that we're hearing just bring home how human this catastrophe is. These are brothers and sisters, moms and dads. Shoot, there's grandmothers that have been taken hostage and little children slaughtered. I mean, I am no different. I'm a son, a grandfather, a husband, a father. And you can't look at these images. You can't hear these stories without being personally touched. And if somehow you can do that, if you can get through seeing those images and hearing those stories and not be touched, then I pity you, because I mean it's soul crushing when you see what's happened to these families. And my goodness, these were people that they were going to a music festival. They were just trying to live their lives. They were at home. preparing meals or out shopping. I mean, the kinds of everyday things that I take for granted. These families were also trying to take that for granted, living in a great country like Israel, and look what happened. So again, it was just, to me, it just was a reminder of how fragile life is, and how important it is to remember every person you see, everyone you see on the sidewalk has a story. And unfortunately, for so many of them, those stories have now ended tragically.
John, you are a retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral. You are more than familiar, sadly, with war. You spoke a bit at one of the press briefings, I believe it was yesterday, about this critical distinction between casualties of war, innocent civilians that are inadvertently killed, for example, in Gaza, and the deliberate attack on civilians, which is what happened in the brutal attack by Hamas. Can you speak a little bit more about that critical distinction and perhaps address some of those who are trying to make some sort of moral equivalency here?
There's no moral equivalency, none. And we should just be clear about that. What Hamas did, I'll put it politely, it was murder. It was actually worse than murder. It was slaughter. It was butchery. The whole purpose of their operation that dreadful day was just to kill. They weren't trying to occupy territory. They weren't trying to loot treasure. This was no ISIS caliphate they're trying to establish on the ground. They simply wanted to kill Israelis because they don't believe Israel has a right to exist, and they don't believe Israeli citizens are free and independent people. They hate them, and they tried to kill them. Now, on the other side of this ledger here, you have the Palestinians in Gaza. They too, by the way, are victims. They didn't ask Hamas to come in here. Most of them don't share any of the ideology of Hamas. They want peace. They want security. They want freedom. They want independence. They want to be able to go shopping and go to music festivals as well without the fear of death. Hamas has placed them even in more danger by headquartering themselves in hospitals and schools and residential buildings. They're using the Palestinian people as human shields. So they are also contributing to the death of innocent Palestinians. Now, look, as the president said, one of the great things about Israel and the United States is two powerful democracies and two powerful militaries is we respect the law of war, the law of armed conflict. We respect the need to try to protect as much as possible innocent human life. But as I said yesterday at the podium, even for all that respect, even for all that effort, in war, unfortunately, civilians, innocent people fall victim. And I'm not justifying it. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying it happens in war. And I wish that I could stand here and say that no more innocent civilians are going to die. But I don't believe that that's the case. I think it's probably going to happen. And that doesn't make it right. The number should be zero. And again, the Palestinians didn't ask for this, which is one of the reasons why, quite frankly, not only are we having conversations with the Israelis about this very issue of the law of armed conflict, but we're also having conversations with them and the Egyptians about safe passage out so that civilians, innocent Palestinians who want to leave for their own safety are able to do that. So we're in active conversations on all these fronts. But yes, there is a difference, a great difference between the potential for civilian casualties as a result of combat and Hamas, which A, is putting those civilians at greater risk, and B, flew on paragliders into Israel for no other purpose than to murder.
John, before I let you go, what would you like American Jews and Israelis who are watching this now to know? I know the president said a lot that was truly important in his speech. What do you want to just, make sure they understand about the United States and how it is taking a position, a very strong position on this situation?
Well, I hope the strong position has been evident to everyone. I mean, the president has said it much better than I ever can. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. They have a right to defend themselves. They have a right to exist. They shouldn't have to worry about what happened on Saturday ever happening again. We know the scope and the scale is equivalent in Israel as to our attacks on 9/11. And we know how that felt here at home. Americans can relate to the kind of terror that just got visited upon our Israeli friends. And for the Jewish community here in the United States, please know that this administration has and will continue to work to identify any potential threats from violent extremists here in the States or from people with anti-Semitic leanings. We're going to work with state and local authorities to identify and disrupt any potential threat. We have an amazing Jewish community here in the United States. It's vast, it's expansive, and people should have every right to worship, recreate, work in safety and security and not have to worry about that. And they need to know that this particular president is committed to doing everything he can to make sure that they can go on with their lives in peace and security. He also knows, if I may add, that while Israel is a small country, Israelis are a big family, and people, they're all over the world, and certainly here in the United States, there's obviously a great affinity, not just in the Jewish community, but across America for Israel and Israelis. And we know that in the Jewish community, in particular here in the United States, there's a lot of pain and suffering. I have many Jewish friends myself, and I've talked to all of them, and they're all concerned about somebody, and they're all worried, and understandably so. I want them to know this administration shares that sorrow, shares that grief, shares that anxiety, but also that we are, like they are, we're stiffening our resolve. We know that this is an important time for Israel, and we're committed, again, to making sure Israel can defend itself.
John Kirby in Washington. John, thank you so very much for the work that you are doing every day, nonstop, and that the administration is doing. We deeply appreciate it.
You bet. My pleasure.
And to give you a sense of what things have been like on the ground in Israel over the last few days, we are joined by American-Israeli Orly Steinberg, a resident of New Jersey who's been in Israel this last week. She joins us now from Bucharest. She will explain what she is doing there momentarily. Orly, thank you so much for coming on the air with JBS. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So, Orly, you posted some videos on social media about what it was like you were staying at a hotel in Tel Aviv, if I'm not mistaken. Tell us what it was like when things first started, that first rocket siren. What happened? When did things become clear that this was not just the usual?
Right. So Saturday morning, we were awakened by text messages and calls from our family at about 7:20. Apparently, the first siren went off at 6:30, but we slept through it and didn't have the app at the time that tells you when a rocket launch has hit. We went outside to the deck. Everything was quiet, somber. We didn't know what was happening. We turned on the TV and found out that there were attacks outside of Gaza on civilians. Kibbutzim. There wasn't really much information, but we were kind of paralyzed and ignorant as to what was going on, but knew that something had definitely occurred.
Now, you're just saying those words. I'm getting chills because I had a similar experience of finding this out. You have a lot of family in Israel. You are there every year, I believe, visiting. You have friends,
Correct.
You have family. This is a very, very difficult time. What happened next? You had sirens throughout the day that day. What was it like running to the shelter in the hotel?
So the shelter, we found out, we didn't know where the shelter was, but we were on the 19th floor, the top floor of the hotel at the Royal Beach, actually right across the street from the beach. And our shelter was right across the hall, thankfully, which is also used, as is very common in Israel, as the pantry, as they called it, in the hotel where they keep the linens, the shampoo bottles, and the towels. So here we were with another couple from Switzerland, and one of the hotel workers telling us what we had to do because we didn't know where it was. We had to close the iron door. We didn't know how long to stay there. You don't really hear anything. You don't know what's going on. And this is for about 15 minutes. It's not like you're there for hours. You're there for about 15 minutes. But as this progressed, you don't know how often you're going to have to go in. So that night we decided to sleep without clothes on, because if you have to get up in the middle of the night, you've got a minute and a half to get to the shelter. My daughter and son-in-law, who were in Israel with us, staying with my sister-in-law in Ramat Gan, came to see us, and they could not get any transportation back to Ramat Gan. There were no taxis, So they actually slept in the room with us that night, which we were comforted to have each other. We brought up a cot, we slept on the couch, and just cuddled together.
And you talk about being in the stairwell, a different instance of when the rocket sirens went off. Tell us about that a bit. What was that like?
Right. So we finally went out on the deck level during the day. And because we were on, I believe, the second floor, we didn't know where to go. And everybody, just everybody, you can see in my video, the panic of getting into the stairwell, women, children, older people. And, you know, you're afraid to be trampled. You want to allow people to get in front of you and everybody to get there safely, but people are panicking and you're hoping that everybody will get there in time. And you start going down the stairs to make room for more people to come in. You're going up. Everyone is kind of like looking at each other, stunned. And then a few of the more religious younger people started singing Messiah High, which was so emotional because you're in unity, you're in community. You're together. You don't know what's going to happen, but you're with each other. You're with your people.
Absolutely. Orly, I know you also met a couple. You posted about this as well on Facebook, a couple that had fled a community in the South. Who were these people that you met?
So we were at breakfast, and we saw a whole bunch of new religious people at the breakfast, and we were kind of curious to see who they were and what was going on. And one couple, he's 65, was sitting next to us. So I went over to them and I asked them, you know, where you're from. And they said, we're from Sderot, which is right outside of Gaza. They had moved there, built a beautiful brand new villa a year ago, almost to the day. And when the rockets went off, they literally grabbed what they could, ran for their life, and he told us, I'm 65. I'm never going back. I'm going to move here and get a mortgage because I'm not going back. And they were there with 10 family members, 10 families. There are 10 sisters. One of the sisters is quite wealthy, and she brought them all to the hotel, was paying for everybody with the children and the grandchildren. So they kind of took over the hotel. And then the next morning, I saw his wife sitting there alone with one of her sister-in-laws. And I said, where's your husband? And she said, he went back. He went back to Sderot. Our house sits on a hill very strategically. And he opened up our house to all the soldiers. Oh. He's making food for them. He gave up his bed. He opened up cots. And she showed me pictures of the soldiers with their guns as a lookout, looking out down the hill. There's a pool in the background. And she said, that's who my husband is.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
It is incredible.
You
the fact that he went back is incredible in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're seeing instances like this of people just coming together and just giving everything that they can in this moment. It is so moving. You also shared that a neighbor of theirs had tragedy.
So one of their sister-in-law's sister was captured, raped, and killed. And they, at that moment, could not even locate the body. So they can't even have a funeral. There's no going back. This will all get worked out in the weeks to come, I guess.
No, Orly, this is all just, it's overwhelming. I myself have remained in disbelief. It all just feels like it can't be real, and yet it's real. You were there. And now you're trying to make your way home. So you're in Romania right now. This is where you could get a flight to, and you're hoping to eventually get back to the States tomorrow?
Correct. So my husband happens to be a travel agent, and he was working every night till 3:00 in the morning, helping people get out of the country in any way, shape, or form to anywhere. And thought in the beginning that our flight this coming Thursday, which was supposed to be tomorrow, would have been okay. And my family in America kept saying, just get out, don't wait for your flight. And I couldn't get out. I couldn't leave my family there. I felt emotionally paralyzed. I just, in solidarity, could not leave and would not leave, and was very torn between my daughters in the States and wanting to be there with my family. And finally, we realized that the situation was escalating and flights were getting canceled, just canceled, not even delayed, just canceled, and very few ways to get out. So finally, he found us a flight going to Bucharest. We're leaving tomorrow morning early for Zurich and then connecting to JFK. And interestingly enough, we got to the airport and I saw that one of the flights to Bucharest was canceled, the previous flight, and we were praying that ours would not get canceled. And then we saw a group of Romanians, some of them Orthodox priests, realizing that they were going as a group on a plane that was sent from Romania to bring them home. And that was our plane. And then we realized we were guaranteed to get out.
Wow. Orly, there's so much grief and sadness right now and shock. I'm glad you're on your way back home. I hope and pray that the situation somehow gets better and that all of your family and friends and stay safe. And
believe me, part of my heart and soul is still in Israel. I have guilt about leaving. I just felt like I have to do something. We have to do something. When you sit idle by and watch this happening, you just feel so helpless.
It is so, so difficult. It's an excruciating situation, I know. And well, we really appreciate you giving us a sense of the last few days there. And again, let's hope for better days somehow, for things to get better and for this war to not drag on. And just sending you all our best.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's just pray for Israel. That's what we can do right now. It's the first time that we've had some kind of unity in the world and some kind of support. We usually go through these things alone.
Very true. Very true. And it's important to have you on and for people to know what's really been going on. And we appreciate it. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you, Orly.
Thank you.
Orly Steinberg is an American Israeli making her way back to the U.S. after several harrowing days in Israel. We thank her so much for being here on JBS.